Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. And this platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 23. My guest, Adam Silva. Adam is a player, character, and executive coach. He is a graduate of United States Military Academy at West Point, where he was a captain on Army's lacrosse team and later named to the 1990s Patriot League men's lacrosse all-decade team. On top of his service as a field artillery officer in the U.S. Army and National Guard, Adam logged over a decade in the music business, was an institutional fixed income and equity salesman, and former chief development officer for the well-established nonprofit Wounded Warrior Project. He remains a highly sought-after public speaker and leadership coach with over 25 years of coaching experience among the high school, college, and professional ranks. Adam is a devoted husband and father of 3 kids. Currently, he is the director of player development for the Jacksonville University Lacrosse Program. Earlier on in my pro career, Adam was our team's character coach, so I know firsthand about his energy, empathy, and expertise. Without further ado, Coach Silva, thanks for making the time to come on.
I'm honored to be with you, Mark. Thanks for that introduction.
So I relate to you so much because you're passionate to learn, teach, and preach about culture, team building, and leadership. When would you say you became interested in these topics, and who were some of your first influences early on?
Wow, I'd have to go back to my time at West Point, specifically on the lacrosse team under the guidance of Coach Emmer, Jack Emmer, Richie Mead, and Mac DeAnge. But I have to admit that while we were going through that process, I didn't fully understand or appreciate it. We were blessed to have a guy by the name of Nathaniel Zinzer, PhD in sports performance, who runs the Center for Enhanced Performance at West Point, work very often with our team. And, Doc Zinzer came in several times and helped us with team building and focusing on culture and being other-centered and putting the team first, putting egos aside, getting to know each other, building relationships. But again, I can't say that at 21, 22 years old, I fully appreciated it. And then ironically, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me professionally was that I got fired from my job in the music business. And when I was let go, I asked them why. And the answer was, you're not a cultural fit. And the great part about that was that led me to the Wounded Warrior Project. And that's where I think this obsession and passion for leadership development, team building, and culture really started to take hold with me. I was hired as what we called the director of people to start the HR department and manage that function, but really to help develop mission, vision, values, and culture for the organization. Our leadership team at the time really recognized that culture was going to be the main ingredient for our ability to succeed and grow and ultimately serve the population of wounded veterans in our country. And I spent the majority of my time at Wounded Warrior Project really studying and being a part of leadership development, team building, and culture. And that's where it really hit home. And it again, as I said, it's a passion and an obsession. And then finally, I was given the book, A Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. It's the story of the Gilman football team in the fall of 2001. But really the story is about a guy named Joe Ehrman, who played football and lacrosse for Coach Simmons at Syracuse. And reading that book changed my life. It gave me a purpose and an understanding of really what success and team really means. So
I love that. There's a lot to take away from that answer. One would be, I love the term that you used, other-centric. Really, you fit it in there. But I saw this quote that it's always great to wake up saying to yourself, who needs me? All right. And it allows you to be other centric. And I love your story about getting fired from the music business, right? A setback is a setup for a comeback. So I really love that. And like I said in the introduction, I know firsthand your ability to put forth and then integrate, which I think is the second and most important part, the culture and core values. Perhaps your answers may have already been covered in what you gave us there, but one of the best ice-breaking games that I love to play is hero, hardship, and highlight. Who would you say was a major hero in your life, either today or in the past? Is there an event or a chapter in your life that sticks out as a hardship that changed you for better or worse? And then finish on a higher note. What's one or two highlights that you remain grateful for, either right now or in the past?
Well, yeah, the easy answer there is my hero, and I've said this for many years. My vovô, that's my Portuguese grandfather, born back in 1921 into poverty, was a middle school dropout, was running numbers for a local bookie. He was a bare knuckle boxer, guy that was really without a whole lot of direction. But he then was drafted into the United States Army, and he was in the field artillery, although I don't know that they called it that back then, which is one of the reasons that I chose that as my branch. But I've said this many times, my vovô was not an educated guy. He got his GED when my father was actually going through high school. They graduated right around the same time. Never made more than $5 an hour, never owned his own home or a custom made suit or fine jewelry or watch, could never afford to buy a new car, but he was the richest man I knew ever. And he was faithful to my vovó, my grandmother, for 58 years of marriage. He raised my father and was just a guy who put family first. And I tell this story often, for a guy that on the outside and based on our society's definition of success was not a successful guy, financially or professionally or educationally. When he died, we had, I believe it was a 3-night viewing, and there was a line out the door and around the block, with people waiting to pay their last respects to my vovô. And the people that came up and introduced themselves in that line were politicians, they were doctors, they were former professional athletes, they were business owners, in many cases millionaires. And they talked about my vovô as a man that they used to go to for guidance and counsel. Quite frankly, that chokes me up just thinking about it. But it was so amazing to me. And that was yet another one of those, life moments where the light bulb kind of goes on and you really start to question what success really looks like. With hardships, I've led a very sheltered life in many ways. I would probably say, losing my mom 8 years ago to pancreatic cancer was a difficult one. But I've said losing my mom helped me develop gratitude as a core value. And the reason I say that is most people die from pancreas cancer within 90 days. My mother was given 13 months. And during those 13 months, nothing went left unsaid. She was able to be with us and be with her grandchildren. And we were just able to love her, and she was able to love us before she passed. And that really, again, it's a life-changing moment where I understood that there was a lot to be sad about losing a woman who was only 64 years old. But I was 41 when she died, which meant I had 41 years with a mom. And number two, we got that 13-month, time together. And then the last one, the highlight, and when you asked me going into this, if there was anything that I wanted to share, my immediate thoughts go to my kids. I don't take a whole lot of credit for who they are today, but I can tell you that my wife and I are extremely proud to have, a son who just graduated from West Point and played professional lacrosse, a daughter who just graduated 3.5 years with a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Florida State, and a young son who's also chosen to, choose a life of service. And he's at the Naval Academy Prep School as a lacrosse recruit. And I mention those things too, knowing full well that my kids, especially my boys, were exposed to the horrors of war, during my 8.5 years at Wounded Warrior Project. They made their decisions knowing full well that the price that they may be asked to pay someday would be a steep one. So that they would definitely be my highlight.
Phenomenal answer, Coach. Thank you so much, and thanks for the vulnerability from your grandfather and your mother. I'm sorry for those losses, but I can really feel in your voice, what it brings me back to is something that kind of gets so repetitive in my life that just like your breath, you forget how important it is. But from Coach Vince Lombardi down to Coach Jim Valvano at NC State. My dad was a senior at NC State when Jim Valvano won it all, so that's a pretty remarkable thing. And Jim Valvano is a pretty influential guy in our family. But it all comes back to, for us, faith family, Green Bay Packers, faith family, NC State, and then faith family friends. That's why I'm so grateful to have people like you on this podcast, because it really comes back to that kind of guidance and impact. And the reason I put the word gratitude in here, which you brought up halfway through your answer, is it's perhaps the healthiest human emotion we can have. And there's a lot of research out there that proves it not only helps with heart rate variability, but it can help with resilience, right? And you were talking about some hardships there that really helped you get through some tough times. And the last thing that I want to touch upon with your answer was a story about cabbage or a flower, right? When a cabbage or a flower doesn't grow to its normal size or beauty, we don't get mad at the flower, right? We get mad at the soil in which it came from. But we're too often in our society, I believe that we look to the individual as them being the screw up or the one that haven't gone to their potential yet, but we don't look at the soil enough. And thank you for giving the landscape of who you are. I love the idea. My favorite thing from your answer was he didn't really have much, but he was the richest man I knew. And I think about a lot of the influential people in my life, and I could say the same about them. One of the key ideas I've taken away from you, Coach, was your definition of a man or woman, right? Character plus relationships plus cause greater than self. Where did you first discover or come up with that idea? And could you elaborate on its principles?
Yeah, that comes directly from Joe Ehrmann in the book Season of Life, and then Joe's follow-on book Inside Out Coaching. It's really amazing to be where my age today, and I have to be fully transparent that the things that I define as the three tenets to success in life were not things that I put a whole lot of value into up until about 10 or 12 years ago. I was in my mid 30s when I was given that book, and then I found out how to get in touch with Joe Ehrmann. We had him come down to Wounded Warrior Project and work with some of our warriors. We had him work with our local high school. I got to know him. And that's really when my definition of what it means to succeed or a man or a woman changed. The first one being, the ability to love and be loved, the relationships that you have in your life. And I think especially for young men, that willingness to be loved. I tell the story all the time when my mother was dying, and right around that same time I had believe it or not, at 41, a heart stent, and I shared that information with the people that I was working with at Wounded Warrior Project, and they loved me. Like they lifted me for the better part of 3 or 4 months as I went through my own health issue, and then my mom's passing and the burial, and cleaning up all of the things that go with a parent passing, and the willingness for those people to love me and for me to let them love me was something that I wouldn't say I've always been good at. And I think we forget about that when we talk about relationships, and then the cause greater than self. When I heard that the first time, I'm thinking, man, I'm not smart enough to cure cancer or map the genetic code, right? I'm not one of those guys. And I've come to believe that you don't have to change the world. You have to change someone's world. And that's really, I think, starting from that, just put one foot in front of the other and do the next right thing for someone else without the expectation of return is how I define a cause greater than self. And it obviously dovetails with relationships and love. It's like love without limits and, give without the expectation of return, kind of sum up relationships in a cause greater than self. And then finally, character, I think for me, I define character as my core values in action, and so sitting down over the years and actually taking time to define my core values and then try to live them. And I say try to live them because I am far from perfect, deeply flawed guy, just trying to do the next right thing. But establishing those core values and then living them is a constant opportunity, and it's a constant struggle to be a better person. So.
And what you gave us there was so exceptional on the fact that right immediately, which I love so much about your answer, was when I asked you, you said, I had a hard time embodying them myself. And that's really, I'll come back to it later. But when it comes to the mental game, it's oftentimes defined as simplex, simple to understand. The complex part is doing it every single day. What you said about loving and letting somebody love you, I come back to a belief system and the actions that we do or do not take are based upon our beliefs, right? Men and women go off to war for what they believe in, right? We go to church or temple or a religious place for what we believe in. Those are our actions. When it comes to lacrosse, I jump in front of shots because I believe it's part of the job description, preventing goals, right? It's what I believe in. And then relationship side, right? Over the course of the last few years, I've come to understand the importance of relationships, whether it's Robert Waldinger's what makes a happy life, the quality of our closest relationships is the number one thing for our longevity and health. But really, it comes down to three things for me when I think of relationships. It's a place where we go to give. It's a place that we go to relate. And taking from my mentor, Dr. Christina Versari, relationships magnify life's experiences. So if you got a bad one, it can turn toxic. If you got a good one over years, it can become great, kind of like ours. One of the things that kind of is echoing that we're not really touching upon, but I want to touch upon directly is kind of service, right? When a service is a word that comes to mind when I think of you, it certainly ripples throughout your entire family. What would you say are the main reasons you, your wife, your kids, your family have such a strong desire to serve in general, but also for our country?
Yeah, that's a good one. When I was commissioned in 1993, I spent a very short time on active duty. The military was downsizing at that time. So I went to airborne school and officer basic course, and then out to the 1st Infantry Division in Fort Riley as a field artillery officer. And then the Army was downsizing, and so they allowed a bunch of us to get out of active duty, take your remaining commitment and double it and go to the National Guard or the Reserves. And so I when I'm asked about my military experience, I'm forever grateful to West Point, especially the Army Lacrosse Program and the United States Army for all of the lessons that it taught me. But it's hard for me to answer because of the 8.5 years I spent serving at Wounded Warrior Project and watching what real service looked like and real sacrifice looked like. And although we didn't deal with the Gold Star families a lot because that wasn't our mission, when you meet a father or a mother, a wife or a husband who's lost a child, who's lost a child or a spouse or a parent, that's when it really hits you. What service and sacrifice is all about. For us, I'd like to say that there's a more romantic answer, but people ask me all the time, well, why'd you go to West Point? Well, number one, I wanted to be in the military. It was either going to be West Point or Navy if I got in. But, we were dirt poor when I was a kid. And so being able to go to an academy where you don't have to pay financially, you pay in other ways, but, not financially, and to be a Division I athlete, it all just kind of meshed for me. And then I'm very upfront I stumbled into Wounded Warrior Project. I had no plans to be in the nonprofit space or the veteran service space, had been let go from the music company that I was with and stumbled in and fell in love. My wife's still the chief development officer there, so she continues to serve. And then coaching, it really, and again, we don't think of these things often, but, being involved with youth and middle school and high school kids for as long as I was, there's a lot of sacrifice that coaches and parents, put forth to help kids have experiences as athletes, and then trying to take the athletic field and make it a laboratory for character development. I think is probably the thing I'm happiest about, is being able to take those principles into a locker room or onto a field or into a weight room while developing relationships with those coaches and kids and helping them redefine success. I think that to me kind of sums up how I feel like I'm serving now. So.
Awesome. A more direct question along the same lines, graduating from Army to where you met your wife, right? And it's obviously impacted you in well-known ways, a lot of the principles that we're talking about so far. But you touched upon it. And can we go a little bit deeper into what are some lessons or takeaways or subtle things that stuck with you from your time at West Point, right? Obviously, the main ones are service and the idea of sacrifice and putting others first. But were there any subtle things that you really can remember as lessons, takeaways from West Point?
The recent commandant, who's there now, spoke during the introduction for my son Miles's graduation video. Of course, they went back to West Point, graduated, socially distanced, but on the parade field. And in the video, that was a build-up to the actual graduation ceremony, General Buzzard said, "We train at the threshold of failure, and that's where the greatest growth occurs." And so when people ask me, what's the most important thing you learned at West Point? I learned how to fail. I learned that failure was not fatal. We used to, and again, I'd say this tongue in cheek, but sweat more in peace, bleed less in war. We sometimes take ourselves way too seriously, especially as athletes and coaches. I think as parents, we're doing a really poor job of allowing our kids to fail and fail forward. I've learned my greatest lessons in life through struggles and failures. And again, when I talk to people or when I'm talking about West Point, they think of, the uniform and, standing at attention, and they think of Eisenhower and, MacArthur and Patton. And the reality is when I got to West Point, I thought that the sun rose and set on my behind and realized in short order that I was neither as good, as smart, as good looking, as tough as I thought I was. When you're forced to take plebe swimming and plebe boxing and have somebody, knock you senseless or almost drown you, you realize that you got a long way to go. And so for me, that's where the greatest growth occurred. And again, then, you fast forward years later, going through personal challenges, professional challenges, you realize by and large that, unless you are in combat or maybe you're fixing power lines, failure is not fatal. It's part of the process.
Yeah, the story that comes to mind is these two bank robbers get caught. They sit down in this chair, and one gets beaten, and the other one just watches the other one get beaten. And one of them was instructed, and the other one experienced. And that kind of reflected in my mind, where kind of which one sticks with you, and that was your experience as a plebe, right? The experience that you have. But Coach, you've been studying, experiencing, and working on performance for decades. What are one or two things, perhaps it's along the lines of failure, that you feel are still misunderstood when you reflect on great teams and what they do well and what seemingly average teams neglect? What comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is kind of two sides to a coin, and that is the humility of your superstars and the value of those who do not factor statistically. When you look at teams, and I think I shared the story with you the other day, the third string goalie who's taking shots during warmups and shatters his thumb is just as valuable as the first string goalie, because if that third string guy isn't in there, maybe it's your All-American goalie who can't play for the rest of the season. I think we need to do a better job as coaches and leaders at work and in locker rooms, creating, and I'm not talking about gratuitous, I'm not talking about being phony, but when you find value in that bottom third, we got 45, we got a big roster this year at JU, but 45 or 50 guys on a roster, you got the top 12 to 15 that, man, if they're not there, the bus isn't leaving, right? And then you got the middle 15, and it's kind of like, well, if they're not there, the bus may take off. It depends on how you practiced and what the scouting report looks like. And then you got the bottom 15, and this is I don't believe this, but this is kind of the way we approach it. I think bottom 15, well, if they're not 5 minutes early, the bus is already gone, right? We've got to figure out a way at work and on sports teams to make sure that those bottom 15 performers can at least be cultural superstars, and that the balance between being extremely skillful or being highly cultural is something that I think we can do a better job doing as leaders. And I spend a lot of time in my role just talking with scout team guys, talking with the fourth LSM or the fourth goalie or the third faceoff guy or the seventh attackman, about understanding that if you go back and believe that it's relationships, a cause greater than self, and character, you're just as successful as our All-America candidate. If you buy that, if you don't buy that, it's going to be real hard because, we have parents, we have coaches, we have high school buddies, we've got media, we've got the internet, we've got social media, always putting pressure on these kids I call it factor statistically. And the reality is that you could have a phenomenally successful 4 or 5 year experience as a college athlete and literally never see the field. So,
yeah, I have to give the nod to Coach Shea at Yale here and his development of buy-in. I experienced that firsthand. My freshman year, Peter Spalding, backup goalie, taking him off the shin in February and March cold up in New Haven. We just got every single year we get an email from Alec Bowen for Happy Thanksgiving, and he didn't play too much while he was at Yale. However, he was such an integral part of our team. And then Teddy Forst, he was a senior who had a breakout in the semifinals during their national championship run. However, he wasn't an integral part as a freshman or a sophomore. So I'm right there with you. I see the stories all the time, right? There's a word apocryphal, right? It's this idea that the story doesn't need to be true or false. It's the meaning behind it, right? It doesn't really matter if it's a true story because these things are happening all the time. It's like the David and Goliath happens every single day, whether that's a true story or not. Here's a tough one, and I just want to probe for a second longer on the strategy behind it, the how-to, right? Because life's a strategy game. It's not necessarily a talent game. So maybe it's not that cut and dry, and it's a very process-oriented journey. Takes a while to get there. But how would you suggest to a boss, to a teacher, to a coach, or any leader for that matter, to make sure nobody feels left behind, or how do you make them feel part of the process? Because it's much more easier said than done.
Yeah, I think for me, when you say part of the process, that's where the success lies. So I hope he's okay with me doing this, but we had a kid at JU years ago named Derek Andrake, and Derek's an upstate guy, not the biggest, not the fastest, not the most talented, not the most skillful. Came down to Jacksonville from a pretty good high school program and kind of, hey, I'm going to JU and I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to factor statistically, right? I'm going to be one of those guys. Well, he's in his sophomore year and none of those things are happening. And let me sidetrack for just a second. We do a disservice to people when we say, hey, if you just try hard enough, there's nothing you can't accomplish. The reality is that's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. But that doesn't mean that trying hard and failing is failure. Or trying hard and not, doing everything you thought you could is failure. This kid, Derek, like I said, he didn't check all those boxes as a 6'2", 200-pound two-way midi, right? He wasn't that guy. And so he came to me one day after practice and he says to me, Coach, I need to talk to you. And we walk over, we sit down on one of the bleachers and he looks at me and he's tearing up a little bit. And he goes, Coach, I'm going to quit the team. And it came out of the blue to me. I thought, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I suck. I was like, Derek, come on. He's like, guys don't even want to do drills with me. I'm like, Derek, come on. Where is this coming from? He's like, Coach, I've been working my ass off. I lift hard. I eat right. I sleep right. I'm doing everything in the weight room, and I'm not going to ever play. And I looked at him, and I was very, kind but honest. And I said, yeah, that's probably true, Derek. The reality is you're probably not going to play. And it kind of stopped him in his tracks. And then I went back to, and so what? So if you quit right now, you're probably never going to forgive yourself. You're going to look back when you're much older than I am, and you're going to think, why did I quit before the miracle happened? And the miracle may not be playing time or statistics. And so what ended up happening with Derek, we continued to talk, and then I moved up to Maryland, so I left the program. Derek ended up becoming a 2-time team captain for Jacksonville University Lacrosse. And he was the biggest cheerleader on the sideline. He was the hardest working guy in scout, getting his teeth kicked in consistently. He did anything that the coaches asked him to do. He'd play offense if you asked him, defense if you asked him. He was the weight room guy. And again, he wasn't the strongest or the biggest, but he was the energy guy. And I kid you not, Mark, we were sitting and talking to our seniors the other day, And John Galloway asked our seniors to talk about a guy that they look to as one of the best leaders that they've ever been around. And two of our guys mentioned Derek Andrake. So again, if factoring statistically is how we define success, then Derek was a failure. If changing lives and being committed to a cause greater than self and leaving a legacy of being other-centered and built for others is how we define success, you're not going to find any better person that I know that you could use as an example of what success looks like.
Love that story. Absolutely love that story. The greatest currency we have is the impact on other people. I'm going to quote Ralph Waldo Emerson here when he's questioned on what is success. And I'll pull it up really quick because I think it's important. But to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life has breath easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And I think you talked about that earlier. You don't have to change the world, but you have to change a world, right? There's a beautiful quote where you're not going to be the world to everybody, but to one person, you might be the world. And that is so important.
Absolutely.
You've worked so extensively with Jacksonville men's lacrosse team, but you've also worked at the high school level and the pro level with me. What would you say are the main similarities and differences between the cultures, the environments, and the styles at the different levels?
Well, I mean, I remember one year, my youngest son was in middle school, my oldest son was in high school, and I was helping out at JU. And I would literally some nights leave a JU practice, drive down to the high school, catch the last hour of the varsity, and then head over to like the middle school. And I'm sitting there looking at middle school kids, wondering why they can't catch and throw and run a 4.40. Right? At the end of the day, I remember that year with the Bayhawks, and Coach Cottle did a hell of a job assembling talented lacrosse players. But I think the similarities to the teams that I've been involved with that have had success is that you have culture guys. I will never forget Ryan Tucker. I will never forget Ryan Tucker coming to Annapolis and not dressing. Not making that squad. And as you know, in the MLL, you don't dress, you don't get paid the game check. And we're in the middle. I don't know what game it was. We're in the middle of the game, and he's standing behind the barrier separating the players from the field. And he was like the loudest, most energetic. I mean, he was banging those things to the point where we couldn't, hear each other talk. And he's jumping up and down when guys score. And that to me was an example of, you get guys like that no matter what level, middle school, high school, college, pro, you got a good chance to do something special. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to win a championship, but that means you're going to have some pretty, amazing experiences. I think of Nick Manis. He's another one. Always played with a chip on his shoulder, but that chip was because he has been slighted, I think over the years in a lot of different, ways. And he was that guy in the locker room that, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were at Ohio, and we had like a 2.5 hour rain delay. Mm-hmm. And you would have thought that we were having a 6th grade birthday party in the locker room, because our guys were hanging out, they were singing, they were dancing, making up games, and just loving each other, And again, I didn't expect that at the professional level. I would have expected that at the high school level, but seeing guys like that being willing to do, take on other roles. And I think that's the same in business. You get people that are willing to do things because they're the right thing, not because it's going to enhance their resume or their bonus or their future. Those are the people that end up succeeding, far beyond their wildest expectations.
Nick, Ryan, both teammates of mine, outstanding individuals. What comes to mind is this balance between funny and serious, right? Where you're making a speech, it's got to be funny yet serious. It's got to be serious yet funny. If you're trying to have an impact on somebody, you can't always be serious. You have to have that soft touch in you as well. To go along the lines of the differences, right? That in the last question, I want to bring this up as a personal question to you. What's a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self who's just getting into player and team development? In other words, what is something that you know now that you wish you knew when you were just starting out as a coach, probably 25 years ago?
As a coach or as a player?
Let's do both.
Yeah, I as a player, I invest in others. Get to know your teammates. I love telling this story. There's a guy named Kevin O'Rourke, tough Irish kid from Long Island, came up to West Point, played some midfield for us. He and I were like oil and water. When I was a sophomore, he was a freshman. Again, when I was a junior and he was a sophomore. And I think it was toward the end of my junior year, we had leave and we were heading down to Long Island. And somehow Kevin and I ended up in the same car. And, if you've ever driven from West Point to, the Suffolk County, Long Island, that hour and 10-minute drive could turn into a 3-hour drive. and that's exactly what happened. And that drive and that subsequent weekend that we didn't plan to spend together, I got to know Kevin O'Rourke. I got to know what was going on in his heart. I got to know what was going on with his family, a little bit about his background. I opened up and let him get to know a little bit about me. And then the next year, my senior year, his junior year, we became extremely good friends. And again, that was a small part of the success we had in 1993. But prior to that time, I can't honestly say that outside of my immediate classmates that I was investing a whole lot of time in the other guys on our team. And it was that last year and a half at West Point where, again, without knowing it, without being able to, I guess, to put it into words, it's when I started to see the results of when I stopped, yelling at Kevin or stopped criticizing him or stopped whatever, and just got to know him. I was able to see a different side of him and him, me. And then again, the same thing happened, I think, as a coach, just understanding that, depending on what level you're at, guys play lacrosse for different reasons. You get a kid in high school who happens to be uber talented, but who's just kind of doing it for a social outlet. It's kind of hard to lean on that kid as you would somebody in a professional locker room. Again, not to be making excuses for players, but you got to really just get to know kids, give them a chance to be who they are. And also, it's a fine line sometimes as the older I get, which is one of the reasons why I think I've gravitated to college now. But, being able to share with kids my experience, and mostly from positions of making a mistake, that's something that allows them to see me as a human being that was in their shoes one day, rather than somebody standing on a pedestal and preaching to them.
Love it. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes that got me kind of deeply enthralled into teaching the mental game was that nobody cares about how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that goes for both your answers, player or coach, right? It's always about others. Dr. Rob Gilbert, mentor of mine, says AQAL, ask questions and listen. It's a very simple concept, very hard to do. I'm a pretty extroverted guy, emotional, passionate guy. I have a tendency to talk over people. And now I'm doing this where I'm waiting 3 seconds before I respond to people. And it's different, but that active listening is a skill and it needs to be honed in. And the 3 most powerful words that you can tell to another individual are not, I love you, but tell me more, right? Tell me more about that. It's probably what you did to Kevin O'Rourke on that 3-hour drive. In the book titled Range that I brought up to you the other day by David Epstein, he explains why greatness tends to come from generalists who are succeeding in a specialized world. And we live in that today, right? There's not just one barber. In New York City, you can have 5 barbers on one street. So given your diverse background, in the military, music industry, sales, how would you say that's helped you become a better coach? How does all that you've done in the past translate into your endeavors today?
I think just being able to relate to people, and I want to, before I answer that, I one of the things that I would venture to guess is that when we talk about things like relationships, love, a cause greater than self, there's inevitably somebody who says, that's touchy-feely, that's soft, right? Like, I'm not here for that. I'm here to coach. Well, you coach the player, you teach the sport. And I think the same thing in business. You lead the person and you meet the number or whatever it is you're doing. And, so for me, being raised as a family that didn't have a whole lot in a very diverse, my dad was in the Army. He was a sergeant major. We were stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland. lot of diversity, financially, socioeconomically, racially, religious. That was such a gift. I went to 4 elementary schools, actually 5. We moved from Virginia to Maryland, got to meet a bunch of different people, having to learn how to make friends. And you alluded to it, 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason, being able to listen. And I was not a very good listener for a long time, but being able to, get people to, be comfortable enough to confide in you or to open up to you is so important. And then to respect that and be very confidential. I tell our kids all the time, everything that you say to me stays with me unless I feel like you're at risk, and then I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to hide it from you. We're going to have to go find somebody that can help you. But, and then the last thing too is, all of this, getting to know people, and that doesn't mean that you compromise standards. It doesn't mean that I can't still push you or yell at you or challenge you or tell you that I'm disappointed in you, but I don't need to question your manhood. I don't need to question your toughness. What I need to question is maybe your commitment, your effort, or your attitude. But, I think that's a very important thing. I had coaches when I was younger that made me feel less than, that questioned me as a young man. Those are coaches that I hate to this day. I'm not proud to say that. Maybe not hate, but I don't respect to this day. Coach Emmer never questioned my manhood, never questioned my toughness, but he challenged me and he rode me for 4 straight years. And I thank him for that, because A, he knew I could handle it. B, it's exactly what I needed. So that's an important distinction here. We're not talking about not challenging kids or not challenging coworkers. We're just talking about being able to invest in them before you do it.
When you say invest, I think of, what's the most powerful thing you can do for another individual is believe in them. And for rightly so, you question them, right? Trust takes years to build and seconds to break. Outside of lacrosse, you're a leader at home, coach too. For a potential parent who might be listening to this, right? You've been able to raise 3 kids who have excelled both academically and athletically. And you touched about it really earlier on as one of your proudest things. So life being a strategy game, and coming back to that, as a parent, what strategies would you suggest as most essential when it comes to raising kids into mature young adults?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if my kids would like my answer to this one or think that I'm qualified to answer it. But, for us, I'm blessed with a wife who's smarter and more athletic and more talented than I am. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not being gratuitous when I say that. We weren't always on the same page as parents, but we always respected one another as parents. We were marriage centered and not child centered. Our relationship was most important first in order for us to be able to love our kids to the best of our ability. There's an old saying, the best thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. And I think my wife was given more reasons not to love me at times than I was her. But at the end of the day, we never quit and we continued to love each other. And so that's been really important. But I would also say that I am my children's biggest fan, but I'm also their biggest critic. And my wife and I have had conversations about this over the years, where at times we felt like maybe we're not supportive enough, or, maybe we're not giving them the benefit of the doubt, or maybe we're not giving them enough. And at the end of the day, my grandfather on my mom's side was a high school principal. My mother's attitude to me when I was a very challenging young kid was, that teacher owns the classroom. You're just renting a desk. So that's how we approached education. That's how we approached athletics. In our house, my wife and I would have conversations about the teacher or the coach, but more often than not, never in front of the kids. But when our kids did something stupid in school or as athletes, their coaches and teachers and administrators were given the benefit of the doubt. And most people would hate what I'm about to say, but I, from experience, know that as a young man, that I was willing to give you a partial truth, which in our family, we've taught that a partial truth is a whole lie. But I was willing to give you a partial truth in order to cover my ass, right? So every time our kids would come to us complaining about something, we would A, push them for the truth. And then B, quite honestly, we didn't believe them all the time. Sometimes we did, but more often than not, again, children, they're going to say what's in their best interest. And so, again, I'm sure that, there'd be child psychologists that want to string me up here, but I'm telling you, for us, we were their biggest fans, but we were also their biggest critics. And we taught them that they were responsible for their actions, both good and bad, no matter what the outcomes were.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you definitely see that in today's society, where you're holding back a little bit because you don't want the psychologist that might be listening to say you're wrong. But I think that's just tough love, right? And dealing with life, which is not easy, right? And you questioning them about the truth is just a little microcosm about what life's going to do to them all along the way. So I don't think you're wrong for a second there. And along the thread of child to parent, mentorship, and jumping back directly into leadership talk, I often state that leaders tend to start off as exceptional followers. I coined this phrase: emulate until you can innovate. Is that something that you agree with? And if so, or if not, what do you see as additional omnipotent traits that all leaders tend to have?
The first thing that they do on our day, it's short for reception day at West Point, is they sit you down in a barber chair and they shave your head. And everybody there looks exactly the same. And nobody there, as plebes or new cadets, are expected to lead. You're expected to follow. And the way that the program worked when I was there is your entire plebe year, you were expected to be a follower. And I couldn't agree more that the best leaders were the best followers. I think for me, I don't put a whole lot of emphasis on rank, title, or privilege, and quite frankly, or time, because sometimes, people with 20 years experience have simply lived the same year 20 times in a row.
Sure.
And so, it's, for me, I'm much more concerned with, again, the definition of success, but also the results that follow. But I think, I think that's probably next to, learning how to fail was learning how to follow at West Point. And quite frankly, this may sound counterintuitive, Mark, but, it also, I think, gives you the empathy to be able to be a better leader, when you know what it's like to be a better follower. Coach Emmer said something to me once, which has stuck with me. We were talking about coaching a few years ago, and he looked at me and he says, Adam, I sometimes think that I would have been a hard guy to work for. And I said, really? Why do you say that, coach? And he says, I was never an assistant coach. So Jack graduated from Rutgers. He was a football player. He was drafted by the Jets, got cut like at the very end, immediately became a high school head coach. Then I think he was at Geneseo, where he coached guys like Dave Urich and Bill Tierney. Then he went to Washington and Lee. Then he went to Army the whole time. And then he coached Team USA. He was never an assistant coach. And so, and I thought that was a really powerful statement coming from a guy who was so unbelievably successful as a leader. But I think, to me, being a great follower is an important ingredient to being a great leader.
Awesome. I think I brought it up to you before, right? The Japanese word shoshin, meaning beginner's mind. And I being over in Japan twice already, I'm obsessed with the little nuances about their culture, right? Us talking about culture all along the way here, right? Just having Kaizen in your life, that continuous incremental improvement, a key guy, right? A reason for being here, a purpose, right? Finding value in what you're doing. And then Shoshin, having that beginner's mind, right? That you can, if you want to be successful, just be insatiably curious, right? So I really love what you gave us there in terms of empathy, right? What I think of is the book Getting to Us by Seth Davis. And he said, it doesn't really matter if the coach is extroverted or introverted. What they have, all of them in that book, is peak, persistent, empathetic, authentic, and knowledgeable. And they cultivate that empathy by all the things that they do. Of course, what you said earlier was so important, is you coach the player, you teach the sports. You have to be knowledgeable of the sport, right? But the authenticity, the empathy, and the persistence you as an individual is so important. The great Willie Mays once said, anyone can be good from time to time. What is tough is being good every day. From your own experience and what you've seen in captains, leaders, teams that you've worked with, could you share your perspective on consistency? In my opinion, that's the hardest attribute of all, is consistency. Are there any stories or insights you could share about consistency from your point of view?
Wow, man. Yeah. And I agree with you there. I'm not a golfer. But I've always been fascinated by professional golfers, because you hear stories of guys being able to go out and shoot in the 70s, a couple times. So those guys do it all the time. They do it every day, and it's the result of, endless hours of practice and commitment to their craft. And I think that one of the hardest things, as when I was a player, is simply being able to bring it every time you step out onto the field. And I can't imagine what you guys go through as professional athletes. Where you're full-time jobs and, it's showing up on the weekends and having to turn it on, staying in shape during, the week and the off season. And also, what our kids go through, with, being in college. We got a kid on our team right now who's a mechanical engineering major, and he has to miss practice once a week, and then he's late another week. And, and this kid is just working, and one day, this fall, I went up to him and he was having a particularly rough practice because he wasn't in great shape yet. And he's like, "Coach, I'm so soft." And he was just kicking himself. And I'm like, "Luca, you are the furthest thing from soft that I know as a coach, but being able to bring it every day is something that I think, and again, that may be effort and attitude, or it may be consistency, in your skill set. But I would argue that it's harder to bring a consistent effort and attitude. I think that's harder than being able to just be great every day. I'll never forget, I had a professor at West Point. He was in the behavioral sciences and leadership. And one day I walked in, and he always used to start the class with a couple of minutes of just small talk and catching up. And, he looked at all of us, and again, this is West Point. I think it was my junior year. And he's like, "Is anybody having a rough day?" And nobody raised their hand. And I kind of put my head, dropped my head and put my hand up. And he goes, "Tell me about it, Cadet Silva." And I looked at him. I was like, "Well, sir, I'm exhausted. Again, we're right in the middle of lacrosse season. And I think it was February, and it's, it's 100 degrees below zero. And we get snot freezing on our helmets when we're in practice." And I was just like, "Sir, it's just," he goes, "Why don't you do me a favor? Go back to your room and take a nap." And I looked at him and I was like, "Where's the hidden camera?" What that they don't do that here at West Point, right? And I think that was his way of acknowledging, "Hey, you know what? We all have rough days, So, and I did. I look back on that and think I'm surprised that somebody wasn't following me, with a demerits or something. And I did. I went back. I was able to sleep for a couple hours, went to practice, and I just looked at that as a coach who had empathy for the process, and the grind and the struggle. And I've tried to do that a couple of times as a coach, or especially, as a work leader, where you meet people where they're at, you acknowledge them, and it's not an excuse not to perform, but it's, hey, everybody has those days, and consistency is tough.
Yeah, I love it. How do you every day bring it? That's such a cool idea. I was talking to Dr. Nick Molinaro, who's worked with a lot of professional golfers, and he said, golf is the most mentally tough sport. And you're sitting there like, how could it possibly be the most mentally tough sport? Great weather, you're not getting your heart rate up too high all the time, right? How could it be, right? But the answer is time between tasks, right? You're hitting the ball, and then you got minutes, right, before you hit it again. And how do you get your mind back into the present moment where peak performance or optimal performance can be had? What's often talked about from an individual basis is, how do I develop confidence, right? How do I have confidence every single day? And I always encourage people, when you feel small, act big, take up more room. And that comes from Amy Cuddy, lead authority on power poses. You talk about every day bringing it. Confidence is an action, not a feeling, right? And that's something I feel is misunderstood. Confidence comes from self-efficacy of showing up every single day action-wise, rather than feeling that confidence is something that comes to you. And when it comes to mental health and mental performance training and performance psychology, it's finally getting to the foreground. It's finally getting the attention it deserves. It's becoming more than just a buzzword. Is there anything out there that really stands out to you that we haven't covered? Is there anything that you feel is misunderstood, kind of like that confidence, what I was just bringing up? Or perhaps we covered it quite a bit, but is there any component that we haven't touched on yet that you think deserves a little bit more credit or value in this conversation?
Yeah, I'll answer that two ways. First, I want to back up a little bit. When I'm very fond of and a fan of Joe Alberici, who's the head coach at Army right now, Army Lacrosse. And as I've said about Joe, I trust him with my wife, my children, and my checkbook. He's one of the finest men I've ever met. We actually asked him to speak to our JU lacrosse team last week, which is unique. John Galloway, very vulnerable, letting another coach come in and talk to his guys. And one of the core values that Joe has for the Army lacrosse team is toughness. They have three: family, toughness, and tradition. And Joe has done an amazing job of quantifying what it means to be tough. And it has nothing to do with physical prowess or, the rah-rah, run through the brick wall stuff. It's doing the hard things and winning. I think he called it winning the unwinnables. When you're in, you can't win a shooting drill or a line drill, right? But win the unwinnables.
Love that.
And Joe said something last week that struck me. And it was simply that when you can't be tough, let your teammate be tough for you. Allow, and this goes back to, love and be loved. We're all going to have bad days. We're all going to have bad days as husbands and fathers and parents. We're all going to have bad days at work. We're all going to have bad days as athletes. Let your teammates carry you for that short time. And then when the time comes, be willing to carry your teammate as well. And I love that little nuance about toughness. Again, being able to do the right thing when it's hard, and then being able to carry your teammate or allow your teammate to carry you. And then the second part is, I'm real proud of the fact that we're doing a lot with our JU guys. And again, this is because John has given us the green light to do it. But part of our character development program at JU is bringing in people to talk about really hard issues. The state of racial inequity and systemic racism, suicide, relationship violence, mental health. We just had the group from Morgan's Message. Beautiful young girl took her life a couple of years ago from the Duke women's lacrosse team. Her parents, unbelievably courageous to come in and talk to our guys about mental health. And that is a heavy topic for 18 to 22, 23-year-old young men. We've had people from the Student Counseling Center, or I can't remember the exact title, but like the resource center on campus come and talk to our guys. We have a sports psychologist on staff at the university who works with our guys. The willingness for our guys to step up and ask for help, whether it's mental, peak performance and mental acuity, or whether it's emotional challenges that they're dealing with, is something that we want our guys to feel comfortable about. We don't want them to think that there's a stigma. And the years that I worked with Wounded Warriors, man, I'll tell you, that was a huge hurdle to overcome. You're talking about men and women who are, have to be at their peak, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and then they come home and they've seen the horrors of war, and now they're in a spot where they need to ask for help because they're dealing with post-traumatic stress. We've had guys, Wounded Warriors, come in and talk to our guys about that as well. There is strength in asking for help. It is not weakness, it is strength. And we want to normalize that for our guys.
That's awesome, man. That was so great. I'm just taking notes left and right here, from the Joe Alberici story and what you were saying about the definition of toughness. Former Navy SEAL Ben Ives gave a definition of leadership, and he said leaders not only disturb the comfortable, they comfort the disturbed, and that's that's helping a teammate out when they need it, not just always disturbing the comfortable as an individual. And then what you were talking about with asking for help, and from the mental health side, I was just nodding along with you. My best friend Anka Tezjan, Ironman athlete, sent to me the other day. We always are sending each other quotes for fuel, as we call it. But he sent me one that said, "We fear what may happen if we take action, but perhaps we don't fear enough what might happen if we don't." And I think that's true for mental health, right? Having those tough conversations that you were talking about. It's so true that why are we not seeing inaction as more costly? That comes from the book called The Catalyst, but there's 5 barriers to action, and that being one of them. We need to see inaction as more costly. Being, as you said, obsessed with this kind of work. When you were searching for inspiration or motivation, are there any books, podcasts, movies, quotes, or mantras that you tend to go back to for reminders or resources or sources of inspiration that are particularly your favorite?
Yeah, this will sound weird, but I keep going back to Season of Life. I've probably read that book 15 times. And maybe because it's an easy read, and I am a defenseman. So, I just keep on going back to, because, it's the path of saying relationships that cause greater than self and character is not an easy one. On the surface, it sounds easy. And by the way, I'm a capitalist, man. I think people should be, be wealthy and have a CEO position and a beautiful spouse and a boat in the backyard. I mean, there's nothing wrong with material success and wealth. But for me, being able to come back to true north and find your bearings, for whatever reason, that book has just struck me over and over and over again in its simplicity. And I'm a fan of Pat Lencioni. When I work with executive teams or whatnot, we go back to the 5 behaviors, or the book is the 5 dysfunctions. But that's been, it's another easy read. But I find great inspiration in that book because it really comes back to relationships. Vulnerability-based trust. So.
Love it. The most important relationship we have is the one with ourselves. That's why I asked the question about where we go for these simple reminders or to keep us fresh and our mental acuity. Right. This podcast blends the importance of gratitude for the relationships, the impactful relationships that you were talking about earlier, and the key elements that lead an individual or a group to greatness. If and when you reflect on your own definition of greatness, how do you define it? What does it look like to you? Greatness?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Because again, I sound like a broken record, but I go back to my Vavoo. It's amazing it's taken me this long to talk about her, but my wife, she's a pretty special woman. And my wife loved me when I couldn't love myself. She was in some, and I was always there physically, but when I was emotionally absent, she was father and mother. And now, she's serving through Wounded Warrior Project. She's been there, I think, 12 or 13 years now. And, I just see the commitment that she makes to that mission. But then also she's fully vested in being a mom, and she doesn't miss stuff. And again, she loves our kids tough, but she loves them. And, again, it all, for me, it just comes back to my wife is somebody who's always loved without limits and served without the expectation of return. And that probably started with me, but it's gone on to our kids, my siblings. She loves them. She loved my mom before she passed. And I think she really loves the people that she works with and the people that she serves. So probably an easy answer because she's my wife, but I'm really lucky to be married to somebody who's as great as she is.
I love that. And it sounds like your wife, Jen, is definitely winning the unwinnables, that's for sure, on a consistent basis. So I'd like to wrap up by saying, could you share a little bit more about what you're up to now in terms of your continued education and where could a listener find you or reach out to you if they wanted to probe a little bit more and ask you another question, because you gave us such amazing answers so far.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I'm a 49-year-old student all over again. I describe my 4 years in the classroom at West Point as survive and advance. And so, again, with the support of my wife and JU, I'm back in the classroom studying for a Master of Science in Organizational Leadership, which I love being a student again. I tease my kids all the time because I'm the guy that you don't want to be in class with because I'm probably studying too much and asking too many questions and putting his hand up on Zoom calls. But it's just been an awesome experience. I'm about halfway through. I get to work with some phenomenal professors at JU. I got my certificate in executive coaching during the early months of COVID through the Center for Executive Coaching down in South Florida. And so I'm working with a very small group of clients right now, high potentials and executives. And again, that's been an awesome, I thought executive coaching was like athletic coaching, but when we coach executives, it's more asking questions than it is giving direction. Because more often the leaders that we work with have the answers within. They just need somebody to coach them to get where they can't get by themselves. So that's been really humbling and fulfilling. And then with JU, we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to get to play a full slate of games this spring, but working with the men's team and the women's team and looking forward to getting after it this spring. So my website is coachsilva.com. And then I'm on the JU men's lacrosse website with my school address as well. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, years ago, right, 2018 it was, you came into a huddle with the Bayhawks and you said, the definition of a man is character, relationships, college grade and stuff. I was like, who is this man and how do I become closer with him? And I'm glad we have become close, and I look forward to years of getting to know you and coming closer with you. You're winning my sales, and I appreciate you taking the time to give us listeners the value that you have. So thank you so much.
It's an honor, Mark. And I feel the same way about you, man. Thanks.